What if I told you that a 150-year-old book of Christian mysticism might actually be, well, a rigorous mathematical proof in disguise? Pretty wild, right? Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're unpacking a fascinating source analysis that takes Mary Baker Eddy's 1875 foundational text, Science and Health, and maps it flawlessly, and I mean flawlessly, onto modern computational logic and category theory. It's a massive, mind-bending translation from 19th century scripture straight to 21st century software architecture. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this.
Here's our agenda for today. 1. The Rosetta Stone of Reality. 2. The Divine Trichotomy. 3. Bugs in the system. 4. Prayer as structural science. 5. Healing as topological repair. And 6. The vacuum broadcast.
Section 1. The Rosetta Stone of Reality, translating scripture to code.
To kick off this translation, we really have to look at reality fundamentally as an information surface. Our source text treats Mary Baker Eddy's theology not just as a collection of mystical beliefs, but as a literal, rigorous software manual for the universe itself. Just listen to this radical theological claim from the 19th century. There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. All is infinite mind in its infinite manifestation, for God is all in all. Now, in its original context, that sounds purely spiritual, right? But when we apply modern formal logic to those exact words, a startlingly precise mathematical framework starts to emerge.
What Mrs. Eddy called matter is formally identified here as the absorbing void, or the pneuma. Think of it like a massive digital black hole where information is just lost, holding absolutely zero persistent invariance. But mind, on the other hand, is the pleoma. Imagine this as the ultimate, perfectly stable hard drive of reality, the fundamental information surface. It basically means the state space of the entire universe is fundamentally informational, operating on substrate neutrality. God, in this model, is simply the invariant law governing that entire manifold.
Moving on to Section 2, the Divine Trichotomy, setting the playing field.
When we systematically map out Eddy's vocabulary, a perfect structural computer science trichotomy emerges. First, you have the agent, which she referred to as mortal man or mortal mind. That's the creature layer. Then, you have the operator, which she called error, belief, or mechanism. That's the supposition that carries causal force in the so-called dream. And finally, God, the divine principle. Mathematically speaking, that is the invariant, the absolute ground state of zero. She literally held these three concepts perfectly apart over a century before category theory even formally named them.
Section 3. Bugs in the system. The two sins as category errors.
Okay, so if the universe is this flawless operating system governed by an invariant ground state, we definitely need to talk about what happens when things go wrong. We have to talk about sin, but pause for a second, not as a moral failing. In this structural framework, sin is quite literally a system crash. It's a software bug. There are exactly two ways this cosmic operating system crashes, and both are catastrophic category errors. It's kind of like trying to use a toaster to browse the internet. It's a complete categorical misunderstanding. The first crash happens when the agent pretends to be the hardware, claiming divine agency. Mrs. Eddy called this animal magnetism, the ancient serpent's lie of, "Ye shall be as gods." The second type of crash is when the mechanism itself is worshipped as the hardware. She termed this pantheism, or enthroning matter as deity. In formal logic, that's operator idolatry.
But here is the ultimate safety net. Only God is immune to this. The absolute ground state cannot occupy a position where it can be deceived. Since it has absolutely no error in its causation, it is mathematically impossible for the invariant to have a category confusion about itself. The bugs, they only exist in the agent and operator layers. The universe's core code is literally uncorruptible.
Section 4. Prayer as structural science, aligning with the rule.
So, if God is a mathematical invariant, how do you even talk to it? Well, she wrote, "Who would stand before a blackboard and pray the principles of mathematics to solve the problem? The rule is already established, and it is our task to work out the solution." Begging the universe for a favor is literally as useless as standing before a chalkboard and begging math to just do your homework for you. The rule is already there. Asking an invariant ground state to change its behavior is a total misunderstanding of how this system works. Instead, prayer is structural science. The operator surface doesn't require our input or spoken words to change its behavior, because its behavior is already fixed. Prayer is actually a structural realignment of the agent to a rule that is already perfectly established. It's the internal state of the agent dropping its errors to achieve what is formally called the ergodic limit. basically arriving at a state of perfect, unchanging balance with the core system.
Section 5. Healing as topological repair, the naming protocol.
If prayer is just aligning with math, then healing in this framework isn't some miraculous suspension of the rules. Actually, it's the exact opposite. It's a rigorous topological repair. Listen to this. As named in Christian Science, animal magnetism or hypnotism is the specific term for error or mortal mind. Eddy explicitly gave a precise label to the system's transient noise. Animal magnetism is the specific term for the mortal mind's bug. And to fix a bug, you don't just ignore it. You have to run a dedicated debugging sequence.
So let's look at the literal step-by-step mechanism of healing, which is called the naming protocol. Step 1, you identify the specific refusal pattern, meaning the exact way the agent is failing to align with the core rule. Step 2, you name it as unreal. You classify it as transient spectral noise, not a permanent underlying law. And step 3, through that understanding, you collapse the error entirely and restore the carrier back to the safe, invariant ground state of 0.
And this brilliant mathematical definition perfectly reframes a really classic theological concept. Atonement isn't some ancient blood sacrifice. It is at-one-ment, literally meaning integration. It's the process of folding the agent's failure into the operator's truth. And because this whole thing is governed by an anti-privilege theorem, meaning it's completely open source, this process isn't restricted to a single historical figure. Any agent with the correct understanding can execute this code.
Section 6. The vacuum broadcast, reflection without cost.
Now, how does an infinite, invariant God actually create an infinite universe without dividing itself into pieces and running out of energy? Well, Eddy used this really excellent 19th century analogy. Man is not God, but like a ray of light which comes from the sun. Man, the outcome of God, reflects God. The ray reflects the sun, sure, but it isn't the sun itself, and crucially, it doesn't deplete the sun. What sounds like really pretty poetry is actually a highly advanced concept in modern cost algebra.
God reflecting across creation perfectly maps to what we call a vacuum broadcast. You see, in cost algebra, duplicating information usually requires energy. It's known as the no-cloning tax. But because the source here is an absolute ground state, it actually permits infinite duplication without paying any energy tax at all. It costs the universe absolutely nothing to reflect its signature everywhere.
Let's pull all these threads together to look at the master theorem of reality. Look at how seamlessly Mrs. Eddy's theology maps directly to a complete, formal, computational logic. Divine principle is the mathematical invariant. Mortal mind is just the system bug. Healing is simply executing a naming protocol to debug the biological mesh. Atonement is open source integration. And creation itself? It's a costless vacuum broadcast. Zero contradictions.
Which leaves us with a truly profound question to ponder today. If a 150-year-old theological text flawlessly maps onto modern mathematical category theory, charting out agents, operators, null states, and open protocols, is our reality simply beautiful code waiting to be fully understood? It definitely changes how you look at the universe and our place within it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the architecture of everything around you.